Always trust.
I'm Steve Clemens in Davos, where world leaders are gathering for the World Economic Forum. As Poland takes on the EU Council presidency, it faces critical challenges, securing its borders with Belarus, managing tensions with Russia, and navigating global unpredictability following Donald Trump's return to office. At home, questions loom over whether President Andrzej Duda and Prime Minister Donald Tusk can present a united front as Poland leads Europe through turbulent times. Abroad, their stance on migration, Israel, and the ICC adds complexity. Prime Minister Tusk has confirmed that Poland will not comply with the ICC warrant to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he attends the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, raising questions about balancing legal obligations with historical and diplomatic priorities. Polish President Andrzej Duda addresses these challenges and more as he talks to Al Jazeera. President Duda, thank you so much for talking to Al Jazeera today here in Klosters on the edge of Davos and the World Economic Forum. It's a pleasure to meet you. Let me just start out that one of the biggest changes in global topography of politics was the election of Donald Trump in the United States. And you have a very deep commitment to NATO at this moment. President Trump is a bit more skeptical of NATO and its role in the world. But we also know that you have a good relationship with the president. How are you going to talk to him about NATO? How do you see that divide with President Trump?
Dzień dobry. Bardzo serdecznie witam w Klosters.
Good morning, and first of all, welcome to Klosters.
Po pierwsze, rzeczywiście jest tak, że
Yes, indeed. President Donald Trump's victory in the US elections was a world-class event. I do not doubt that if you look at the United States' position in world politics and security, you will see that it is the biggest superpower in terms of its economy and military. From that perspective, this change at such a level is going to be a big change for the whole world. And what I expect to see is a very decisive but also very pragmatic policy, centering first and foremost on the interests of the United States. And that does not mean that this is going to be a bad time for the free world and for those who wish to cooperate in the sphere of economy. It's going to be quite the contrary, I would say. It's going to be a time of economic competition, and competition in which the United States wants to participate. So it's going to be tough, but fair. As far as security and NATO-related issues are concerned, I have to say that I absolutely do not agree with the notion that President Trump is skeptical regarding NATO or the US presence in NATO. I believe that all those statements we can see and hear made by the media and different commentators result from their lack of knowledge about the specificity of President Trump's policy and perhaps a misunderstanding of his approach towards NATO. They don't understand this approach. They do not want to understand it.
sprawy NATO, czy też może nie chcą go zrozumieć.
President Trump had been very proud of securing a broad commitment of many NATO members to 2% of defense spending of their GDP. You wrote a Washington Post op-ed in which you said that number ought to be 3%. My understanding is you saw President Trump shortly after that. And now President Trump is talking about a 3% target for NATO member nations and their contributions to common security. Were you the source of the 3% target that Donald Trump is now talking about?
Po pierwsze,
In March 2024, I was in Washington and met with President Joe Biden. On that occasion, I proposed adopting as a rule within the alliance that defense spending should not be lower than 3% of an individual country's GDP. And there was a very simple reason for that. I believe today we are looking at Russia's aggression against Ukraine. So what we are seeing right now is the rebirth of Russia's imperialism. Russian imperialism is reborn. And we can see that in this war in Ukraine, which has been going on for almost 3 years. Right now, Russian imperialism is greedy, and it is extremely dangerous. For that reason, we need to build a security zone. The last time we had such a zone of security was during the Cold War. At that time, Poland was behind the Iron Curtain. Poland was part of the Russian sphere of influence. And today, in the face of this reborn Russian imperialism, what the free world has to do is once again recreate this security zone to protect itself against Russian aggression. Because, as I said, we are seeing the resurgent Russian imperialism. Whatever name we give to it, it is the same. It's Russian imperialism. Whether we are speaking about the times of Tsars, Soviet imperialism, or Putin's imperialism, it is still the same thing, the same notion. So, we need to protect the world from Russia's renewed chance to launch a new attack against the free world. The way to do this is to raise defense spending to at least 3% of GDP, ensuring its modernization, development, and security. I made that proposal to raise defense spending when I talked to President Joe Biden in the White House in March 2024. Then I discussed it with the media and repeated that same notion when I met with President Donald Trump at Trump Tower. At the time, we had a very nice, very long and very interesting conversation. And indeed, I proposed that defense spending be raised to 3% of GDP.
Tak jak rzeczywiście wcześniej zaproponowałem.
So you've been on the front line, Mr. President, of concern about Russian aggression, the invasion of Ukraine, what to do about it, and marshalling forces to be there. Getting a deal between Russia and Ukraine is a very high priority for President Trump. I've spoken to General Keith Kellogg, who is going to be President Trump's envoy on this. General Kellogg says he needs 100 days to get this done. What are your hopes and your concerns about a peace deal at this point, or a ceasefire deal with Russia? What would be a green light that might incentivize Russia to continue its aggression from your point of view?
Po pierwsze, sprawa jest rzeczywiście bardzo poważna.
This is a very serious issue. Ending the war in Ukraine is not simple. It is very complex. That is also what I understand from Marco Rubio's statement, saying that this is a serious matter and that the approach has to be serious and calm. I think we are going to witness in the weeks and months to come Donald Trump and his collaborators, his team and his experts discuss it and work out such a peaceful approach. It is also my conviction that it's going to happen this way. Different rhetoric is used during a presidential campaign. All the candidates and presidents running for office know things are heated then. It is different when it comes to the execution and implementation of things. They look quite different. I have no doubt whatsoever that President Donald Trump is serious about this topic and that he's going to face up to the challenge of bringing the war in Ukraine to an end. And I'm sure that he's going to do everything in his power to end Russia's aggression for the security of the free world, but also for Ukraine. What is most important, and I'm sure that President Donald Trump has a perfect understanding of that due to his strategic thinking and knowledge of the world, and also due to his understanding of the specificity of our region, is that Russia must not win this war.
Rozumie, Rosja nie może wygrać wojny na Ukrainie.
Is there any formulation, Mr. President, of an arrangement where you would countenance the deployment of Polish troops inside Ukraine as part of a stabilization agreement? And whether or not you would accept that, are there other steps, bilateral steps, that Poland might see as positive in terms of creating a stabilization?
Ale to są dzisiaj spekulacje, które sięgają...
Today, we are just speculating because we could create thousands of scenarios about deploying forces and speculate about what kind of forces should be deployed, whether these should be NATO or UN forces, and which countries should send such forces. But today, we are speaking pure speculation. This matter should be discussed and left to the experts to decide, but I believe President Trump will demonstrate a very pragmatic and clear approach to that. We must remember that we are not just speaking about military grounds, but also about powerful and strong economic grounds. I believe President Donald Trump understands this and probably knows it better than anybody else. I believe that President Trump can make life very difficult for Vladimir Putin if he wants to. He can resort to different economic and political means to adopt this particular approach. I think he can even bring him to despair purely by resorting to economic and political means without military means. It is not only a matter of missiles, or how many and what kind of missiles the US will send to Ukraine. It is not a matter of money. How much money the US will give to Ukraine or how much money will be put on the table. other elements are at stake, such as the possibility of the US exerting political influence globally. It is also a matter of the strength of the US economy. It is also a matter of the United States using different resources in global trade. So there are a lot of other elements, and I do believe that President Trump knows them well and knows how to do that better than anyone else, as I said before. That is why I'm calmly waiting for President Donald Trump's first steps and decisions. I have no doubt that this is what we will have to expect in the near future.
Możliwości, że należy się ich rzeczywiście wkrótce spodziewać.
Let me ask you, Mr. President, about the ascension of Poland to the EU presidency. And you right now cohabit a government with Donald Tusk's government, and I'm just interested in, to what degree are you going to pull together towards a vision of what Poland should do with this time in the presidency, and where will you pull apart?
Znaczy, ja mam bardzo proste spojrzenie na...
My view is very simple regarding the Polish presidency in the European Union, which we have assumed for the next 6 months. Well, all of that is also shaped by the situation in Europe and by its relations with the United States. My view is very firm. It has been shaped throughout almost 10 years of my tenure as president. I have cooperated with and had contact with 3 consecutive US presidents and different administrations, both Republican and Democratic administrations. When I assumed office as the Polish president back in 2015, I cooperated with President Barack Obama. We made very important decisions during that NATO summit in Warsaw in 2016 on deploying NATO forces to Poland and the eastern flank of the alliance. That was the first historic decision made at the time to have a US military presence in Poland. Then came the presidency of President Donald Trump, which was a great time for our country and for Poland. We signed a lot of military contracts between Poland and the United States. We also had excellent energy contracts for LNG supplies to Poland. We also had an excellent social policy vis-à-vis Poland. The visa waiver program was adopted during Donald Trump's presidency, and it played a very important role for Polish families, especially those with relatives overseas. Then I cooperated with President Joe Biden. This happened also during Russia's aggression on Ukraine. President Biden visited Poland twice, so these were very important events. In this sense, the priorities of the Polish presidency in the European Union are very well set and very firm. They have been shaped by all those events that I've just mentioned. If you look at the role of the United States and its importance in the Euro-Atlantic relations, in the relations between the United States and Europe, which have been so important for more than 100 years now since World War I, the priority of the Polish presidency in the European Union is very clear: to forge a closer bond between the European Union and the United States, especially in regards to the economy. We encapsulated it in a simple slogan: having more United States in the European Union and more European Union in the United States.
Let me ask you a question. It's a little complex about some of the playbook of stress along borders. And when I think about the EU, and I think some of the other leaders that I've interviewed, they've talked a lot, particularly in Eastern Europe, about the way migration has been weaponized and how Russia and Belarus and others are attempting to destabilize governments with migration insertions. Poland has shut much of its border down. It has stopped the right of asylum in this. Tell me about this process, because I would like our viewers to understand, because the United States, to some degree, is arguing much the same thing with its southern border. But many human rights people have raised questions about whether this is the right track for Poland, and whether those that are basically victims in other governments ought to have a place to go. So how do you reconcile Poland's big flank with Belarus? And Belarus was the place where Russia invaded Ukraine from. So how do you reconcile some of your needs from a security perspective with values that are democratic values and human rights values?
Przede wszystkim zacznijmy od tego, że to jest rzeczywiście...
This is indeed an issue of politics. The political approach to migration and the influx of people from other cultures and nations to Europe. We are an open country, and everybody who wants to come to Poland can do that. Everyone looking for shelter, aid, and assistance. Everybody fleeing war and persecution can come to Poland and find a safe place there. But first and foremost, we expect that person to accept our rules. First, they will respect the rules regarding their entry into our country. We cannot accept that they enter our country illegally. Secondly, we also expect them to have respect and tolerance for our customs and respect our laws.
Będą szanowali obowiązujące w Polsce prawo.
Thirdly, people also expect all those coming to our country will build together with us a well-functioning state, a state of prosperity. So, briefly speaking, they are expected to work together with us for the common good. Poland has had religious tolerance inscribed in its legal system and mentality for more than 500 years. That is why nobody in Poland asks about the faith, belief, or skin color of the people coming into our country. They are not even interested to know what country they are coming from. The question is whether these people are ready to live with us in a peaceful and responsible way. And that is why, as President of Poland, I did not agree for Poland to become part of the quota system for the distribution of migrants across Europe. That is why I kept asking the following questions. What do you want to do with the people coming to Europe? Do you want to put them on trains or buses or any other means of transportation by force? Do you want to bring them to Poland, to my country, by force? And do you expect us to keep them here by force?
I co, i chcecie, żebyśmy my ich przymusowo w Polsce przetrzymywali?
What we saw in 2021 was indeed a hybrid attack on the Polish border by Belarus. We immediately realized this wasn't a spontaneous journey of migrants wanting to come to Poland. First of all, we realized that those people were coming to Belarus by plane, and this shocked us. So, are these the poor people who are looking for shelter? Are these poor migrants, and they're using planes to come to Belarus? I'm sorry, so who's buying them tickets to get on these planes? And then it turned out that those people were not poor. We came to realize this quite quickly. We have documents to support this, and we have video recordings that show these actions on the Polish border were not only provoked, but also steered and orchestrated, I could say, by the Belarusian authorities.
Funkcjonariuszy władz białoruskich.
Those people were brought to the border with Poland in an organized way by groups of police officers, border guards, and representatives of the Belarusian military. And they were pushed by those authorities and representatives to cross the border with Poland. An important point is that we are not only speaking about the Polish border, it is also the border of the European Union. And this is the border of the Schengen zone in the European Union. We have an obligation to defend and protect this border, not only to our own citizens, but we also have this duty before the European Union. It is our obligation, and we decisively stood to protect that border. Polish authorities did not hesitate, even for a moment, despite different kinds of criticisms by the left-wing circles in Poland and abroad. We also decided that the only reasonable solution is building a higher barrier on this border to defend it.
Wysokie ogrodzenie na tej granicy po to, by ją chronić.
So let me ask you a question. Thank you for that. And I can tell this is a major issue in Poland. Let me ask you a sensitive issue. If I were interviewing, and I have interviewed advisors to Xi Jinping and advisors to Vladimir Putin, and they say very boldly and publicly, the era of Western-style democracy is over, that it is fading. You're criticized in Poland by some of your cohabiting government officials as using your veto over issues about judicial independence and whatnot. But what I'm really interested in is your views on democracy's ability to be resilient in this moment. Is democracy still a form of government as we see populism rising? What is your perspective on what the elements, the key elements of democracy are when we see such stress in the world, including in Poland? What do we need to preserve? What is being, what is going to suffer?
Istota demokracji dla mnie polega na dwóch podstawowych czynnikach.
The essence of democracy, in my opinion, is based on two fundamental factors. First of all, we have a division of powers. Within this division of powers, they have to balance each other. A lot of people do not want to understand this because with their game, they are distorting liberal and democratic systems. To make things clear, This distortion concerns the system of justice. The judges were becoming the main people deciding about things, becoming those in power. And they do not want to see an external influence. They want those who assume the power to be elected only from within their own circles. That distorts democracy very clearly, because nobody knows who these people are, and nobody votes to elect them. So first of all, the balance of power, a true balance of power. There has to be a balance of power between the three branches of power: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative powers. The second thing, which is extremely important to me, is that the composition of power has to reflect the voters' true will in the election process. Of course, the best expression of democracy would be to make decisions jointly through a referendum, for example. However, in big states, this is simply impossible. Now we are in Switzerland, where direct, democratic tools play a very important role. However, in big countries, that would be an extremely complex issue. That is why we have elections. In some countries, we have parliamentary, presidential, and local elections. And this is the soul of democracy. As long as the results of the elections themselves, and the composition of powers reflect the will of the people expressed in the elections, I believe that democracy exists.
To ja uważam, że demokracja jest.
Mr. President, one of the other big emotional international issues coming up that you've been involved with is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the extermination and concentration camp Auschwitz. This is going to be a major emotional touch point for many around the world. You also successfully got a resolution that would keep Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel from being arrested if he were to come to that commemoration of that liberation. And I'm interested in the emotions of this and how you and Poland feel about this moment, but also how, reflecting on the fact, as I think around the world and the crises, you've got 117 million people displaced in the world. We see the aftermath now, if the peace treaty or if the ceasefire holds between Gaza and Israel, many people who feel victims again of a moment. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is no doubt a very controversial figure for some in the world. But tell me your thinking about this commemoration of this moment, your actions with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and what is Poland trying to say to the world?
To jest bardzo złożony problem. To jest bardzo złożony problem ze względu na bardzo też szczególne...
This is a very complex problem resulting from Poland's very specific situation. This results from two things. First, the German Nazi concentration camps on the territory of Poland, and also due to the relations between Poland and the State of Israel. We have in Poland right now, in the current territory of Poland, the remains of the German occupation over our lands, and the remainder of the occupation are the German Nazi concentration camps. Today, they are largely museums and historical sites. A lot of people make the horrible mistake, resulting from their lack of knowledge of history, of identifying those camps with Poland. All those camps, especially the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, were built by the Germans during World War II, when Poland did not exist as a state because we were under occupation. German Nazis murdered millions of people in those horrible places. They murdered millions of European Jews, including 3 million Jews who were Polish. Those camps are in what today is the territory of Poland. We take care of them to ensure that the remembrance lasts, the remembrance of history and the remembrance of the victims. Jews from all over the world came to visit Poland. But of course, they also go to visit those concentration camps to pray for their loved ones and to pay tribute to the murdered ones. We respect that in Poland, and so we do everything we can to ensure that pilgrims can, in fact, visit these places. We do know very well that this issue is extremely sensitive. We also see it from the point of view of the more than 1,000-year-old Polish-Jewish relations. Many times, Poland was criticized and attacked by many Jewish circles for those post-war relations. There are Jewish circles reluctant to admit that a very big number, a huge number, of the righteous among the nations, those who were rescuing Jews in World War II, were Polish people. And those difficult relations also resulted in a difficult moment between Poland and Israel, including in recent years. We are a stable country. We are a credible ally of the State of Israel. We respect world peace, but also for tens of years, we have supported a two-state solution between Israel and the people of Palestine. A two-state solution is Poland's official policy. The paradox of the current situation is that when Israel was attacked over a year ago by Hamas, when Israeli settlements were attacked by the terrorists of Hamas, and Israelis were murdered as a result of that attack, when that horrible conflict broke out in the Gaza Strip, we had Polish citizens on both sides of the conflict, and we had Polish hostages taken by Hamas and kept probably in the Gaza Strip. But we also had Polish casualties on the Palestinian side who died as a result of the fight. Polish citizens died on both sides as a result of this war. We are trying to adopt an objective view of this. That is why we are stressing who attacked. It was the Palestinian side who attacked. Who launched that attack? It was Hamas. But we also stress at the same time that Israel is obliged to respect international law even if there is a war. We are going to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi concentration camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. And we are saying the following. We are not looking into assessing the International Criminal Court and the situation in the Gaza Strip. We are in a very special situation, and this 80th anniversary of liberation is quite extraordinary. And we, as Poland, are saying every Jew from every place in the world has the right to come to Poland, has the right to go to Auschwitz and to pay tribute to their loved ones who were murdered there. And we, for sure, will not stop any person from doing that. We believe that's the right of every Jewish person, especially of every Jewish person with roots on Polish soil. Because we, as Poland, lost 3 million Jews from among almost 6 million Jews who died during World War II.
Well, Mr. President, I think we're at time. I want to thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Thank you so much for your candor and sharing your views with us today.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to meet with you.